Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag from the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're back again this week to kind of catch everybody up on what's going on in the world, if they didn't get it the first time around. I guess we're going to start off. Let me tell a few things here real quick. We're going to talk about the results from Friday night's high school football games. Glasgow will be playing again this Friday at Taylor County at 7 o'clock. That's confirmed. We also have a couple of interviews coming up with Warren Cunningham and Piper Lindsey. And before we go into those interviews, I'll explain a little bit about how those are working out because there were some changes that were made that we're going to talk about in our final segment, John. But first of all, let's kind of talk a little bit about some high school football there, John.
All right, let's go.
All right, so I went to the Barren North Hardin game on Friday night. I think you were unable to go. I think it was Jay Turner and Robert Bauer just because of the limitations of people in the press box. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, so... But I think you and I both have the same conclusion from our games that we've seen between Barren and North Hardin. And the first thing is Barren competes well against a team that a lot of folks consider to be a threat to win the 6A state championship.
Yeah, in the four meetings between Barren and North Hardin the last 2 years, Barren has played North Hardin extremely competitive, to say the least. And North Hardin has, in particular, defensively, North Hardin has not been easy to score against the Trojans, and that continued Friday. I mean, they scored on some special teams play. I believe they scored on a kickoff return, and their first one of their touchdowns was kind of like a flea flicker that you don't see often. So. Barren was. You got to give the Barron's kids credit. They played without any fear, and they competed against North Hardin. And I think a lot of people probably thought this could be a blowout, but it was really not.
Yeah, the final score was 42-6, but the last two touchdowns that North Hardin had, one was on a 99-yard interception return, and one was on a fumble they recovered in the end zone. And both those scores, I think, came in the last 5 minutes of the game.
That's right.
And Barren, it was 14-0. Barren scored, made it 14-6 on a really good run by Gavin Withrow. I think it was like a 14 or 15-yard run. And there was some life there. North Hardin didn't really do anything offensively, as you were talking about, that you would look up and say, oh, I can see, why people think they're one of the best teams in the state. But then on the flip side of that, Barren just did a really good job. They did the two things you really got to do when you're playing a team that probably has more physical ability than you. And I point this out just because North Hardin is, typically speaking, one of the top track teams in the state, which suggests they have speed. And the couple of things you really need to do is you got to make tackles and you got to try to, prevent the big plays. And usually you do that by getting them down the first time you get there. And Barron's defense did a really good job, I thought, of both of those things throughout the game. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, give Coach Muse a lot of credit, defensive coordinator. He obviously knows how to play North Hardin.
Yeah. And
the kids obviously know how to take that game plan and put it into place. They did not give up hardly any both times this year against North Hardin. Have really not given up any big plays defensively. And like you said, one of the keys to playing a team that's explosive, you got to be able to tackle. And Barren did that quite well Friday night.
Yeah, now on the flip side of that, I will say this about North Hardin as well, which sometimes I don't know that you see when you see a team that believes that it is physically better than the other team they're playing. North Hardin will hit you, and they get a lot of people around the ball, which is also why Barren struggles really to try to get any big plays themselves. North Hardin does a very good job of not giving up big plays from what I've seen.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're obviously one of the best defensive teams in the state. I mean, they've got a couple kids on the defensive side that's one's going to Kentucky and another one is another Division I player. I mean, their team speed is actually more so, in my opinion, on their defensive side than their offensive side. I mean, They are a quality defensive team.
Yeah. Now, elephant in the room, they're running back that's going to Kentucky, Lavelle Wright, did not play in the game. From what I understand, he wasn't injured. I don't know why he didn't play. And I don't know that it really mattered in a lot of ways because, as we've seen, North Hardin, for some strange reason, likes to throw the ball all around the yard, and that's, again, what they did Friday night. And, I mean, maybe they got a junior quarterback, and he's got the physical tools, but he's not the most accurate passer, and maybe they just decide to work on their passing game when they play Barren. I can't say what they do in other games because I've not seen them play anybody else.
Yeah, I noticed the running back did not play, but if you just want to be fair, he's not had a lot of big plays against Barren in either the first game or really that many the games last year. I don't know if they're holding him out because they're trying to keep him fresh for the playoffs, or there was some type of injury in practice they weren't going to release. But it's obviously when you got a Division I running back, when they don't play, it can't it doesn't help you from the North Harbor perspective. But to be fair, he's not really hurt Barren in the past,
right?
And they don't use him a lot against Barren.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm curious. I would love to go to a North Hardin game when they're playing somebody else just to see if it's different, in terms of their game plan and that kind of stuff. I just don't know. I think you and I would agree upon this point. We've seen them play 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years, and we're not thoroughly convinced with what they're doing on offense. Now, like you said, their defense is obviously good, but we're not thoroughly convinced of what we've seen from their offense, that their offense is really that great, or I don't know, maybe not. Their scheme isn't that great. I'm not sure.
Well, it's hard to, just what, you mentioned, I've only seen them play us, but obviously they're good. I mean, they went up and beat Belfry at Belfry.
Right.
Belfry's, one of the best overall teams in the state year in, year out. They beat Frederick Douglass up in Lexington, and, Douglass is
I think they're the number 1 5A team right now.
Top 10 program in 5A, so... I mean, they can play, but I just think Barren does a really good job of scheming against them.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Meanwhile, the Glasgow Scotties ended up taking care of business against Adair County at home. They didn't play at all during the regular season. Twice Adair chose not to come to Glasgow and play, and because of, the Red County stuff, supposedly. And so once Glasgow did get a chance to play on Friday night, they pretty much took care of business. Ran the ball effectively, and did all the stuff that they need to do in order to move on in the playoffs. And I think, so I want to talk a little bit about their matchup with Taylor County come Friday night, because the deal come Friday night, Taylor County ended up winning the regular season game 35-15. Glasgow was up 15-14 at halftime, and a couple of things for Glasgow had happened coming into that game. The first one was their game the Friday before that had been canceled. They were supposed to play Caldwell County. They ended up with 2 weeks off. And in their game just before they actually played Taylor County in the regular season was the game against Logan County when their quarterback, John Carter Myers, got hurt. And so I feel like the first time they played Taylor County, Glasgow was in transition to what they are doing now versus what they had been doing before that, John.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, this change in offense has been, it is really hard to do. I don't care what sports you're in, basketball, football, whatever, to have a drastic change in your offense. And Glasgow has really pulled it off. This going to this new style, and it's primarily running. The running offense has fit them to a T. They get to use all their backs, and it fits their quarterback quite well. And plus, it controls the clock, and it's been a huge change. Give them credit now. They're going against the best opponent they've played in the last 4 or 5 weeks in Taylor County, and they're going to Glasgow will have to play as well as they can to beat a good Taylor County team.
Yeah, I think the last time they played them, they turned the ball over, fumbled it away, I think 3 times in the second half. And I don't know if Taylor County turned all 3 of those into touchdowns, but I think they turned 2 of them into touchdowns. And, that was Easton Jesse's. I believe that was his first, game where he started the whole game. And even though they had those couple of weeks of work on it, he's still a freshman, and they were throwing him, into a critical game in a circumstance like that. Now, I don't know. I mentioned the fumbles and him playing quarterback. I'm just saying he wasn't responsible for the fumbles, but it kind of that transition to the offense had to happen, I guess, because you had this young quarterback in there, and you're trying to figure out a way to take advantage of your other weapons like Jaden Wyrock and Hunter Scott, and Kieran Stockton and Jamarian Long and all those guys, figuring out ways to get them involved in the offense and get them touches so that you can make some explosive plays, which you go back a couple of weeks ago when they played, 3 weeks ago now, when they played Franklin Simpson, that's exactly what we saw, John.
Yeah, I mean, they are better. Clearly, the freshman quarterback is going to be better now than he was 4 or 5 weeks ago. 4 or 5 weeks ago, when he was thrown into action, the experience is going to make him much better. I think another advantage that Glasgow could have this Friday against Taylor is Taylor has not played for a while. They basically got a bye. The team that they were supposed to play this past week canceled out, so Taylor is going on close to 3 weeks without playing, and that's a long time to wait around.
And that's a little bit ironic for them because I think they were one of the teams that played all 9 of their regular season games or 8 regular season games before having one canceled. And the only reason that one was canceled is that was the week that they called off everything. I mean, Taylor County had managed to play football every week of the season, and that has been very rare this year.
Yes, they've been quite fortunate. So, Taylor County's got a tremendous running back, and I completely forgot his name, but he's maybe their all-time leading running back in school history. He's way up there, and so Glasgow's going to have to do a really good job of containing him, and obviously not turning the ball over. But I would probably make Taylor a slight favorite with their experience coming back and knocking off Glasgow last time. But it's a game. It's a very winnable game for the Scotties.
Yeah, I'll be up there on Friday night. People can follow 104 The Score Twitter for updates from the game, and then there'll be photos and other stuff from the game at 104thescore.com. Before we head into these coaches' interviews, real quick, I want to talk about legendary WKU men's basketball coach John Oldham. He died. I believe that was announced this morning. And the thing about Oldham was people will know, 71, they went to the Final Four, the WKU Hilltoppers. He was a longtime coach there, athletic director at WKU. But I think one of his greatest impacts as a basketball coach in this area was he recruited players from this area, and those players were on his best teams. And I thought that was just a very impressive part of his legacy. And when I say players, I mean guys from Glasgow like Jerry Dunn and Rex Bailey played for him in the early 70s, late 60s. Clarence Glover from Caverna played for him. Jim McDaniels, one of the all-time greats in high school basketball in Kentucky, from Allen County.
Clem Haskins from Taylor County, Campbellsville.
Yep. He had all kinds of players that from this area, and that really kind of put WKU basketball on the map and probably established at least a fan base for men's basketball in this area, John.
Yeah, WKU during that period of time, late 60s, early 70s, was elevated into a national power.
Yeah. John, before he got to WKU, John Oldham was a head coach at Tennessee Tech, and one of his first recruits there was a guy by the name of Kenny Sidwell, who played at Caverna. And then Kenny Sidwell replaced Oldham when he left Texas Tech and became the head coach there. Kenny Sidwell's dad, here you go, some history for you, John. Kenny Sidwell's dad used to be a basketball coach at Glasgow back in, I think, the 40s, I think it was when he was there. He may have been football coach too. So it's kind of an interesting long tale, as they like to say, of history related to basketball here in South Central Kentucky, but especially here in the Barren County, Glasgow, Caverna kind of area, John.
Yeah, that is. That's true. I did not know that connection. That's very, very interesting.
And one other thing, the WKU men open their season this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. against North Iowa in the Crossover Classic. They're not in the tournament in Nebraska anymore. This one's like in North Dakota, I think. So they are opening their season. Lots to look forward to there. Real quick, before we get to these coaches' interviews, I want to explain a couple of things. One is I've recorded these interviews because it was going to be hard to have people in the studio. John is actually on the phone today with me instead of in studio. And so we've recorded these interviews. Of course, we recorded all these interviews before the KHSA had their meeting last Wednesday, which I mentioned John and I will talk about in our final segment here. And so I've had to edit them when it comes to the discussion of the early season schedule. Kind of stayed with the basics of these interviews in terms of talking about the players on the teams and that kind of stuff. But, some of the schedule we will talk about that we talked about starting on January 4th, which is when basketball season is going to start now, John. So
yeah, I mean we'll talk about the ramifications of that later. It's unfortunate it's pushed back, but it's fortunate that we're still going to have a season.
That's right. All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. First up, we have Warren Cunningham, and then we'll have an interview with Piper Lindsey, Barren County Trojans, Barren County Trojanettes. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Welcome back to the Brown Sports Bag. We are here with Barren County Trojans basketball coach Warren Cunningham, athletic director, and man who mans all the gates apparently during the time of COVID. Warren, thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. We are here to talk about the upcoming basketball season. One quick question about your schedule as I'm looking down here. Nash 1037 broadcasts all of Barren County's football and basketball games, but a little bit of a struggle this year because there seems to be more split games on the schedule. So instead of being a boy-girl game, girls or a boys only, how did that kind of come about, you think?
Well, it's we try to schedule girl-boy games, and sometimes the girls' coaches and the boys' coaches both don't want to play the same opponents.
Right.
And so that's really, 100% where that comes from because we prefer the girl-boy games. It's, most times than not, it's a much better atmosphere. Our fans that's kind of what they're used to and what we prefer. But it's just to be honest, it's 100% the fact that we can't always find opponents that want to play both of us.
Gotcha.
So that's just where that comes from. Some seasons there's generally maybe one or two. I think this year there's probably two or three. A few more, a couple for each of us. But that's where that comes from. That's really common with a lot of schools. It's not common with us.
Right.
We play most all of our games girl boy. That's what we prefer, and mix in with our Christmas tournaments, a classic here or there, but that's 100% where that comes from.
So, were the schools not wanting to play you guys this year?
No, I don't think. I think it has a lot more to do with the girls than us.
They've been pretty good.
So they have, and that's sometimes with scheduling. People for whatever reason don't want to play this team or that team, and that's you have that. That's the right you have as head coach and AD to kind of make those schedules, and everybody kind of has their own thought process. But that's kind of where that comes from. So.
I would say there's some outside high expectations for your program this year because you have a lot of your talent back. Aiden Eichen, most people will will stand out to them, but you have Gavin Withrow back, you have Tay Pointer back. Ryan Shirley, you have Corbin Murphy back, who's going to be, I guess, 100% healthy, hopefully, once football's over with and all. And so you kind of enter the season with, I would say, some expectations on your team's shoulders at this point.
Yeah, I think so, especially when you return a player like Aiden, an all-region player that's just one of the best players in our area. But we also, like you mentioned, have several guys that have quite a bit of experience. Gavin Withrow, for the most part, has been a 3-year starter for us. Mm-hmm. Started a lot as a freshman, has a lot of experience. And then we have several other guys, Tay Pointer, Ryan Shirley, Mason Griggs is a guy that's started games for us off and on over the last few years. Corbin hopefully will be healthy when we get him there, and then some sophomores I think that can maybe step into some of those supporting roles. So we do, even though we lost 5 seniors, we do return a lot of experience, a lot of different positions. So that's always good, and it's good to have expectations. That usually means you return some good players. And I'd much rather that be the case than not.
Yeah, it is kind of strange, I guess, to say that you lost 5 seniors and yet expectations are high on you, because that's usually not how it works.
Right. No, it's not. And, I think that just goes to show the depth of the guys we had last year, and what you always try to have. But, losing Will Bandy hurts, a guy that's a double-double and 4-year starter, scored, 1,400 points in his career. So, losing Jacob Shaw hurts us, the ball handling, his ability to make shots, and then the depth at some of those other positions with those guys that we lost. But the good thing is hopefully we have some guys that can fill those voids.
When you look at the district itself, I would say you and Allen County have to be the favorites because when we mentioned, they have their own Shirley who seems to be a killer at playoff time, and they have a lot of solid players back with Jax Cooper and the like. So when you look at that particular matchup between the two of you, just to start with, I mean, do you see that as kind of the horse race expectations-wise?
Well, I think you can look at it from that perspective now, but I think we've learned over the years that those type of things change sometimes over the course of the season. Glasgow will have a young team as far as an inexperienced team, but I think they have some pieces to be a good team by the time that the end of the season rolls around. The same thing with Monroe County. Both of those schools lost several older players, seniors that had played a lot for them over the years. So I think that when you look at it from the start of the season, us and Allen probably have a little bit more experience, and you would look at it on paper and say, well, they're probably a little bit ahead of the other two. But I think we've learned over the years that those things, the gap can close rather quickly over the course of a season. But Allen returns most all of their team. They had a lot of juniors, and like you said, Mason Shirley is without a doubt one of the best players, and I think arguably at the end of the season last year was playing as well as anybody in our region, and probably as well, you could say he was the best player in the region. So, just as always, we'll have our hands full.
You mentioned the no give-ins, I guess, in the 15th district. I mean, that plays out year in and year out. By the time you get to tournament time, there's never really a blowout. There's always these overtime games, 2-point games, that kind of thing, right?
It is, and I think it says a lot about the how hard the kids play and how competitive the kids are. Even if maybe your team isn't as talented, I think the teams in this district always seem to make up for it with their effort and the intensity they play with. And, you get to know each other, the teams and players and coaches all get to know each other so well that, that kind of, you can do some things. I think the coaching is really good from the aspect that they can take away some of your strengths. They see you more than anybody else.
Right.
The teams in your district, from freshman games to JV games to varsity, they see you. They know your strengths and weaknesses, and I think a lot of times they're the best at taking away some of the things you do best, and that closes the gap sometimes.
Right. When you look down your schedule beyond the district games, what are some games on your schedule where you're looking at trying to see what you've learned about your team or the development of your players as the season goes along? Are there some games on the schedule where you say that's going to be a good test for us to learn some things about ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always those type of games, but I also think that you can look at it in segments. And Coach Riley was always real big on this as far as looking at the your pre-Christmas schedule. With us, that includes 3 district games, which is not always the case. Usually it's just 2, but this year it's 3. Then you look at it from the aspect of your Christmas tournaments, because you play several games over a short period of time, and then you come back and you get into the grind of the season in January, because usually there's especially with our schedule, that's usually a really difficult part of our schedule. And there's also a lot of games in the month of January. And then when you get to February, it's you're fine-tuning and getting ready for the postseason. But, you look at what, at least preseason-wise, some of the best teams on our schedule, and you kind of look at those to say, well, you kind of see where you're maybe where you're going to be at, or where you need to be. But obviously Bowling Green will probably be a top 5 team in the state with the players they have returning. I know Warren Central lost a lot of players, but they're still going to be really good. They've got the kid from South Warren that gives them a good piece to build around with their young guys. Greenwood, Clinton County, those are both games that are pretty late in the season, but are still going to be 2 of the best teams that we play. Especially with no scrimmages.
Right.
You usually have 2 scrimmages to kind of work. I was thinking about that in practice of the day, because usually we always go back and watch film of the 2 scrimmages to say, hey, these are things we got to clean up. It's little things that you don't see in practice that really kind of show up when you start playing against somebody else. And so we won't have that. So it's it's going to be the first few games to kind of work out some of those kinks.
Yeah, I was going to say that first segment is almost like these would be our scrimmages. Let's see what we can figure out from these particular games.
And that's almost how we have to look at the first 2, because the third one is a district game.
Right.
So you got to get it done the first 2. Right. But in a lot of ways, that's how it's going to be. Just because you don't have those games to kind of those scrimmages to look at, and whether it's the rotation, whether it's things that you do and things that you need to do better, or things you need to stay away from doing, it's going to be in the games rather than the scrimmages this year.
Real quick, I've asked every coach this particular question, and it is, with the challenges of this particular season and all, is there a specific kind of message you've been giving to your players as they get ready for the season?
I think it's a couple things. I think first of all, and you have to be flexible. It can't be. There's not going to be a lot of routines, whether it's practices, games. We may think that we're going to South Warren on Saturday the 28th, and we end up playing somebody else.
Right.
Or we may get canceled and we play Monday instead of Saturday. So you have to be flexible. And that goes with all of us, coaches, players, fans, parents, everybody, because there's just going to have to be a lot of flexibility. And I think the second thing with that we've really tried to stress with our guys is that you have to have a lot of self-discipline. Whether that's if we're learning virtually, then we've got to have the self-discipline to make sure we're taking care of our classwork. It's harder. It's harder on kids when they're not in the building, when they're at home. If we have to take breaks in the season, if they're healthy, they got to have self-discipline to stay in shape, kind of stay on top of it a little bit. They can't if they're healthy, they can't just take 2 weeks off and then come back and pick up where we were at. So I think those two things, being flexible and having the self-discipline to, with our guys, just like right now, we're virtual as far as learning. Well, if they've got to stay on a schedule. If they don't have meetings or classwork early in the day, they can't sleep till 10 or 11 o'clock, and then get up, take care of that, and expect to be very sharp at 3:30. They got to stay in a routine. So we keep saying nothing about this season is going to be normal. That doesn't mean you can't have success and you can't win games and you can't do some of the same things that we normally do, but you just can't look at it the same way. Whether it's the travel to the games, the benches, the sidelines during games, all those things are going to be different, and you can't let that affect how you play and the way that you approach the game.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I think that's kind of the way everybody's having to look at this year, Warren. And right now, I guess the thing we can be thankful for is the fact that we're going to be playing basketball. We don't know what it's going to look like, right. So we might as well just learn to live with whatever limitations or challenges we have.
That's exactly right, and just try to make the most of every day, every practice that we get, every game. Hey, because we don't know that something may happen and it could be the last one of the season. So, our guys got to do their part. Our coaches, everybody has to try to do their part to stay safe. To stay away from this stuff as much as I told our guys all the time, hey, we can do everything perfectly and it can still cause us problems.
Yeah.
But let's do our very best to stay away from it, to try to it's I understand teenagers, it's tough to tell them not to do things socially. I mean that kind of defeats a lot of the purposes of being a teenager. Right. I understand that. But it's just some of the sacrifices we have to make if we want to play very many games.
All right, Warren, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Brown Sports Bag. That's Warren Cunningham, Barren County Trojans basketball coach. It's Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
We are here with Barren County Trojanettes basketball coach, Piper Lindsey. Piper, thank you for joining us on the Brown Sports Bag today.
All right, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We're just going to jump right into it. I know you didn't lose a lot of players off of last year's team, but you lost one that people might miss, especially you, Elizabeth Bertram. I mean, she led you in scoring. I mean, she's been a solid player for the program for a number of years, I guess since she was in the 8th grade, really. And that means there are going to have to be some people who step in and fill at least some portion of the role that she served for you last year.
Yeah, all three of those seniors actually played important parts in the postseason run that we did have with Eve Jackson and Carly Duck. But, yeah, mentioning Elizabeth Bertram in particular, definitely some huge shoes that somebody has to fill. As a matter of fact, just the other night, I think she had her first game at Campbellsville and hit 3 threes. That was right. We were pretty excited to see her moving on and doing so well at that level. But you're right, we do have to have somebody that steps up and it takes over the scoring and everything that she did. She was a great defensive player. She could handle the ball. Mm-hmm. She played so hard. But yes, we definitely have to have some kids step up.
I mean, you mentioned Carly Delk and Eve Jackson, and they did play critical roles in the last couple of years, the runs you guys have made in the playoffs and that kind of thing. But I guess the thing about Bertram is just her court awareness that is just rare for so many players.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and like you said, she played for, 4 or 5 years at the varsity level and, 1,000-point scorer, the highest scorer, actually. Sorry, more than that. But, yeah, just like I said, the overall player that she was, we've got some kids, Katie Murphy, she's just a freshman. She's one that I feel like has that court awareness like that. But then, you've also got Raven Ennis who can score it like Elizabeth, is getting there like Elizabeth did. She's still got a ways to go, but definitely one that I think is going to be able to step up for us.
Do you have some other younger players that are going to be coming in that you're looking for, or even maybe I know you got a couple of seniors, M. Hughes and Liberty Rice, that may be getting a lot more time than they have in the past?
Yeah, with Emma and Liberty, they got a lot of experience the last few years, hit here and there, and so they know the speed of the game and how we do things. So I really do see them coming in and playing some key roles for us. But then Macy Lockhart, I think she's another one. She's just going to be a sophomore, but played a lot of minutes last year. That has really gotten a lot better since March, and has developed where she can score the ball inside. We're working on her outside a little bit, but again, another kid that plays extremely hard. So that's another one that we're really looking forward to.
In that first week or a couple of weeks of the season, what is it that you look for from your team?
I think that the main thing about us is we're just worried about us. We want to focus on, what we're doing defensively, and obviously, people talk about offense, but our chemistry and just doing the little things and making sure that we get better every single game. I know that Warren East game is going to be a tough one, be a nice little rematch. If you think about what happened in the regional tournament, but again, I don't think we really focus on so much of who we're playing, but it's more about us.
Back to the kind of the influence Bertram also had on the team. A lot of times when you have a player that is kind of so dominant in the scoring and that kind of thing, you have to remind your other players that, oh yeah, you're on the team too. Don't just watch them play. Is that something that you have had to do over the summer, is to remind people, you're going to have different roles and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have. These first 2 weeks of practice, that's kind of been the mindset. Who else is going to step up now that, the Elizabeth's gone? And I think a lot of the kids look at Raven, and of course she showed it a lot last season. But now it's almost to the other kids. All right, what if they take away Raven? Now who's going to step up? And
right.
That's when, these last 2 weeks have been really good as far as, I know people probably think I'm crazy, but I feel like it almost like it was like we didn't even skip a beat. I mean, our chemistry is still really, really good. We're still learning a lot. Yeah. We're still learning a lot of things. But other than that, I'm really excited about this team we have coming back. We've always said that you got to be ready to go regardless of what happens, the previous game. But again, at that time, we're still, focusing on us and, understanding, what works best for us defensively and offensively, and who's gonna bring it each and every game.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your district. I mentioned you play in Monroe County there. They were basically a rebuilding kind of last year, but they do have some good young players from what we saw. Allen County, they have some players back. I think they had some injuries leading up to last season that probably set them back a little bit. And then Glasgow, they lost, I think, 3 starters. That were there from last year. So when you kind of look at your district, how do you think it's shaping up outside of your team? How do you see these other teams?
I think everybody's very even. When you say Monroe, they do have a lot of kids that are young, but they've been playing at the varsity level, it seems like, since the 7th grade. And so, no, I think they're going to be tough. And when you mention Allen, they've got Metter back and Cook back that played, huge minutes, Carter, that seemed to always give us a hard time when we played against them. So, of course, they're extremely disciplined and well coached and fundamentally sound. I think they'll be tough. And then Ainsley Adwell's still over at Glasgow, and she's top 10 in the region at least, and if not top 2 or 3. That's one person we're going to have to stop. But I think that it's going to be very even.
Do you look at? You're going to tell me again. You're going to focus on you. I'm pretty sure based on this question I'm about to ask. But when you look at the teams in the district, do you feel like you guys are in a pretty good position because you are bringing back Katie and Raven, especially those two because they've played in so many big games the last couple of years? Do you feel, does that give you a sense of we're in pretty good shape when it comes to our district matchups?
I mean, I think yes initially, but then again, you never know. I mean, especially having 6 months off like this and, no summer to really kind of see. But again, at the end of the day, nobody can make an excuse because everybody's in the same situation. And yes, we will focus on us, and that's kind of our game plan going into every single game. I'm not so worried about, what they're going to do. I mean, we do look at that a little bit, but a lot of it is, what can we control? Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of our focus.
Are there any other games on your schedule here? I mean, games that you look at and you're like, okay, this is a pretty good test for us, or you tried to get this team on the schedule because you wanted to get a good matchup?
Well, E-Town, that's one team I think that's going to be a very big test for us. We played them last year at our place, and we're returning the favor. I think that'll be a good one. And then I think Pulaski County will be another big one. But I think it'll be really good to play other teams other than the same, ones that in our region. But those for sure. Casey County is always really, really good. But of course they did lose quite a bit of theirs. But again, I like the way our schedule is. I feel like it's we've got some winnable games, but then I also think we've got some games that'll be tough for us.
Yeah, I'm asking all the coaches this question here, because it is an oddball kind of season. You mentioned, basically being off for 6 months or 5 months, whatever that was over the summer, and not being able to do a lot of the things you usually do. And when you're heading into this season, it's a season of uncertainty in a number of ways. Mm-hmm. What is the message to your players about this particular season beyond just the getting ready to play basketball?
I mean, I think, we keep telling the kids, let's come in, let's worry about what we can worry about, and who knows what's going to be a week from now. We keep telling the kids, we're going to start November 28th. That's the game plan. That's what we're, planning on doing. So we're working towards that. But I think it's just kind of one day at a time, 1 week at a time. You never know what can change. But at the end of the day, we're being as positive as we can. Let's work to get better and hope that everything goes as smoothly as it can. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else about the upcoming season you can think of that people should know about you or your team?
No, we're just excited. Again, excited about this group. I know we lost 3, but have a lot of some talent coming up that's young even. I mean, our middle school program's even excelling, which they have been. And so, we're just excited to move forward.
All right. Well, thank you, Piper, for coming in and talk to us. This is a Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
All right, we're back. Again, I want to thank Warren Cunningham, Barren County Trojans coach, and Piper Lindsey, Trojanettes coach, for coming by and talking to me last week. Well, it's actually been close to 2 weeks now. And, whenever we did those interviews, there were a lot of things that we didn't know, such as that at that time, today was supposed to be the first day of the high school basketball season. The Caverna boys were supposed to be playing tonight. Obviously, that's not happening, and there will be no games until at least January 4th as of right now. And John and I are going to talk about that. The KHSA met last Wednesday. They decided to postpone the start of the basketball season until January 4th. As a matter of fact, they can't even practice again until December 14th. I think that has more to do with the closings of the schools that was initiated today. And John, when you saw the news out of the meeting last Wednesday, what was your general reaction?
Not surprised. I'm not surprised that they pushed the season back. I mean, they had hinted at that with the when they delayed the football playoffs for about a week, and then the governor had came down with his with his recommendations and so forth. So this wasn't surprising at all to me that they pushed it back. I'm little surprised that they did not extend the season much longer. I think they added another week or two at the end, but I kind of thought maybe they would push the state tournament to April and just start spring sports there, and maybe extend the spring sports a little bit more into June. But and I think they discussed that too, because it looks, I don't think you're going to see much of a change in COVID in the near month or so. But I do think with the vaccines and everything that by the spring we could be close to getting back perhaps the way it was. So I was a little surprised that they didn't do the extension part of it, but not surprised at all that they pushed it to January 4th.
Yeah, I'm with you on the extension, and I'm sure not a lot of people, I'm sure, sit around and watch a 5 or 6 hour board meeting. And let me just tell you, I don't necessarily enjoy doing it, but it was an interesting discussion on the day that they had it, because a couple of reasons. One is the governor's recommendations or orders had not been released yet publicly. But it was kind of obvious during the course of the meeting that at least Julian Tackett and maybe even a couple of the board members had some hint that the governor was going to want to close the schools starting, today and have those closures going on, and that he was really wanting the suspension of all activities until December 14th, and that because that brought about a discussion about maybe starting the season on December 14th, and Tackett pretty vociferously said he felt like that'd be making a slap in the face to the state health officials and that kind of thing, which I thought was an interesting statement at the time. But the other thing that kind of came out of it was that discussion about whether or not they would do the basketball state tournaments in late April, early May instead of in March. And I don't know why there were certain members of the board who were just fixated on the idea of going ahead and having the tournament in March, John.
I don't either, because it would you're going to have it in March. Attendance is going to be severely restricted, and I don't care what anybody says. The KSOSA, financially, it's a monster hit to lose the state tournament back-to-back years, much less 1 year, but you throw in 2 years, and it just seemed like to me the pushing it back to at least middle of April would assure a better chance, at least, at having a better attendance. And I just, I know there was some discussion about with the spring sports. You get into travel ball and all this other stuff in the summer, but man, I was a little bit surprised. But I'm happy that they're still going to have a season. I've said all along they're going to have a season.
Yeah.
The problem that you're going to get into, even if you start on January 4th, is that you may have 18, 20 games scheduled, but the way things look right now, your chances of playing all those games are not going to be real strong the way the cancellations have come about in football.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this. I've been told since that meeting that going into that meeting, Tackett, well, at least going into last week, Tackett and some other people on the board really wanted to go ahead and start the basketball season. And,
I agree. They did.
And just, deal with it sort of like they have in other sports. If you have cancellations, have cancellations. But I think there must have been some pretty severe pressure because of some of the orders that were coming down that the KHSA needed to do the best it could to go ahead and follow those same restrictions that were going to be handed down to businesses and recommendations handed down to, meetings for the holidays and that kind of stuff, that it was going to be really hard to go ahead and play sports in this window of, I guess, political pressure.
Well, in December, right, but that shouldn't affect I'm talking about extending it through at the back end of it, which it should be much better by that time. That's what I'm talking about. That's what surprised me. I understand why they would right now when our the rate is so high right now. I understand that, but I thought they could fix the problem by extending it on the back end.
Well, and they will have another meeting on December 10th. I think that's what the meeting is scheduled for at the moment. And I will be surprised if they don't revisit the idea of extending out the basketball season and doing the state tournaments in April. And I get a lot of people who already lost, coaches and players who've already lost the season, that being the people who do spring sports. They didn't get to play at all last year. And I get the idea of trying to protect the sanctity of the seasons that they could have. And I think that's the right thing to think about. I don't know how much of an impact that would have on the spring sports, having the state tournament in April. And I say that because I just, I know there's overlap of people who participate in the sports, but I don't know how many of those are going to be playing in April.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some. I would just say extend the spring season.
Yeah, you could extend it. Okay, so based on the insurance for the KHSA, as I understand it, that could run through June 30th. You could run a spring season through June 30th at least without any challenges, unless, there are players who just don't want to keep playing through that end. But I imagine if people want to have a season, they will make that sacrifice at least, right?
I would I would think so. I mean, I've got nieces that play basketball and softball, and you know, I want I desperately want them to have their full season.
Yeah.
One niece already lost her junior year in softball, and I want her to have her full senior season as well. So I just have the kind of the philosophy that it's going to be better the later in the spring. I think things are going to turn so much better just with the vaccines and treatments. It looks like that's what's going to happen, but we'll see. These are not easy calls that anybody's making, and I hate to be critical of anybody in decision making right now because these are tough decisions.
Right, I agree with you. And then I will say this also, not related to sports per se. There's been a lot more reporting in recent days on the pressure of illness on the medical facilities. And it's not so much whether or not a hospital has enough beds. It's whether or not they have enough people to staff it. And there are some challenges there in South Central Kentucky at the moment, and in Barren County even, to just staff the medical facilities because this is the high illness part of the season, even if you didn't have COVID-19. And so that's something
right.
that has to be taken into consideration in terms of, not having events at the moment. And that will extend into January, I'm pretty sure, unless, there is a vaccine that it comes along that can be distributed pretty rapidly. And right now, there's still a challenge, even if we have vaccines, to distribute them rapidly. So that has an impact on, when the basketball season can start and finish. But you're right, things should be better in the spring one way or the other. And those outdoor sports have proven to be not too bad at like the spreading of the disease, John.
That's exactly right. There has not been a whole lot of direct, that as far as we can tell, spread of COVID from team to another team when it comes to football or any of those sports.
Right. So there's what we're looking at. Basketball season will begin, all winter sports seasons will begin January 4th. I mean, that includes swimming and bowling. I don't know if archery.
College basketball supposedly starts Wednesday, but, cross your fingers on, watch the cancellations with that. I know Tennessee's head coach, Rick Barnes, has just got COVID, and they're delaying their activity. So
yeah, I think there have already been 2 or 3 kind of high-profile games canceled and some changes in schedules from one event to the other. As we mentioned earlier, the WKU men are now playing Wednesday at 3:30 against Northern Iowa instead of playing in Nebraska, which is where they were originally scheduled to play.
I mean, flexibility is going to be the name of the game, and you got to be flexible and be able to turn on a dime.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, let's talk a little bit about some college football. We'll start out mentioning the fact that the WKU football team scored points and won a game on Saturday. That was pretty impressive, John. Yeah,
good win. I mean, they got two touchdowns on defensively, so that kind of spurred it, and they put up 38 points. And I know FIU, I don't think it's won a game, but still, it's a good way to end your home season.
Yeah, that was a good win for the Hilltoppers. As I mentioned in the first segment, they're actually going to play Charlotte on Tuesday of next week at 9:30 a.m. instead of on Saturday. Apparently, Charlotte's in some COVID protocols, so they're going to be able to get out of that. Playing Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. is the most oddball time I've ever seen for a college football game.
I don't understand that. I'm sure there's got to be a reason, and I'm sure we'll find out later about that. That just seems like an odd time to play.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Kentucky looks like they just ended up folding up Saturday. I mean, Alabama beat the snot out of them, John.
Well, it was very competitive in the first half, to be perfectly honest with you. Kentucky played quite well, and of course Kentucky has been really hurt with COVID issues, to say the least, and shorthanded. But it got out of hand quickly, and kind of, that's not a loss that you're real proud of when you get beat 60-something-3 on national TV. But they was very competitive most of the first half until the very end of it.
That's right. Well, this has been a Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.